Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major news stories in the week ending. I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. Sub-Saharan African nations and other regions in Africa have been hit by persistent drought and famine. In an effort to stem the growing catastrophic effects of more than 2 years drought and conflict-related food insecurity, relief agencies have sounded warnings that these African nations have been hit by the worst health crisis in the world.
This is the face of famine in Africa. Aid organizations around the world are sounding the alarm.
Acutely malnourished children, we expect there will be 1.4 million over the course of 2017. Okay? That includes 275,000 severely malnourished. This is the most severe form of malnutrition, the kind that makes children 9 times more likely to die of diseases such as cholera or measles or even malaria.
More than 2 years of drought and conflict have created a crisis in a number of East African nations, including Somalia, Niger, Central African Republic, and Kenya. But aid organizations say they can stop this from happening.
The world needs to know the problem, how severe it is. And these are conflicts that are man-made. Between FAO and World Food Program and other humanitarian agencies, we have the strength, the structure, the logistical capacity, the technology to get the job done. What we need are resources or end of the conflict.
Food aid and relief supplies are being dropped into many of the affected regions, but it's too little, and for many of those affected in Somalia, too late.
When we declare famine, it's because people are already dying from hunger. It's not that they will die, they are already dying.
Aid groups are asking for billions of dollars to deal with what they know is coming. An estimated 30 million people need food assistance in Yemen, South Sudan, Nigeria, and Somalia. But the World Food Program says they only have the means to help 8 million of them.
Meanwhile, food insecurity and famine caused by drought and civil wars have led to the continent's worst humanitarian crisis in decades. The United Nations believed it is the world's largest crisis in 70 years.
Africa is facing its worst humanitarian crisis in decades. According to the UN, it's the world's largest crisis in 70 years. 20 million people across the continent don't have enough food. Hundreds have died and many more lives remain at risk. Much of Somalia is facing emergency conditions, and in parts of South Sudan, famine has already been declared. The root causes vary. The weather events El Niño and La Niña have led to droughts in eastern and southern Africa. In northeastern Nigeria, a brutal insurgency by the terror group Boko Haram has displaced thousands and disrupted harvests. An infestation of army worms has decimated crops in southern Africa. Across the continent, conflict and land management practices have exacerbated the problems. The Congo River is experiencing a 50% drop in its water level as a result of the drought, something that hasn't happened in 100 years. Camels, which can survive 3 months without water, are dying in Somalia. A similar crisis struck the Horn of Africa in 2011, killing as many as 260,000 people. National governments and aid organizations say they learned important lessons from this tragedy, but some critics fear it may not be enough. As the story unfolds, the Voice of America will continue to cover the human toll and the international response with reporters on the ground.
Leading civil rights groups in America have said African Americans and Hispanics have made positive gains in improving their economic and academic life. In a new report, the National Urban League stated that despite the strides in education and finances, minority groups in America still lag behind their white counterparts in other measurements of racial equality.
The theme of this year's State of Black America report is Protect Our Progress.
National Urban League CEO Mark Morial says blacks and Hispanics, the nation's largest racial minorities, are better off economically than a year ago.
The jobless numbers have come down, and more black people and more people overall are working today than in almost 10 years.
But the State of Black America report suggests African Americans and Hispanics still lag behind whites economically. The annual study found the standard of living for African Americans is 72.3% of that of the average white person. For Hispanics, the equality index is 78.4%. Despite some progress, Morial is worried about wage growth.
Even though people are working, they're economically in pain because their paychecks don't go as far today as they went 10 years ago.
The index measures quality of life for blacks and Hispanics in terms of economies, health, education, social justice, and civic engagement. According to the report, racial disparities plague minorities when it comes to social justice equality, noting that more blacks are jailed than whites after being arrested. African Americans did make gains in education, with a growing percentage of blacks staying in school.
We've seen progress on decline in the dropout rate, as well as we see more African Americans gaining associate's degrees.
The study also found a troubling rise in hate crimes against religious and racial minorities such as Muslims.
The nation of a great mosaic that the United States of America represents cannot tolerate hateful incidents. It's corrosive, it's divisive, and it's un-American.
Morial says the Urban League will resist efforts to roll back any of the programs reflected in the report, especially when it comes to things like education, job growth, and social justice. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Washington.
As the talks of a frosty Davos continue to grow between Britain and the European Commission over Brexit, Britain is looking towards Africa for stronger trade ties. The Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson stated in Uganda that Britain hopes to build on its historical ties with Africa as it leaves the European Union.
Britain says after leaving the European Union, it is going global. On a recent visit to Uganda, Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said the first stop would be its former colonies.
We are re-entering the Commonwealth, re-entering the rest of the global economy.
That re-entry has been dubbed Empire 2.0 in Britain, but in many former colonies, memories of British rule are at best mixed, says British lawmaker Kwasi Kwarteng, a key figure in the campaign to leave the European Union.
The Empire has a mixed legacy, so to try and relive that past, I think is a completely ridiculous and forlorn exercise. But what we can do is to try and use those relationships that were forged, some of them through the Empire and then latterly through the Commonwealth.
The British Empire's legacy continues to be debated decades after its collapse. In South Africa, statues of the colonialist Cecil Rhodes were torn down in 2015. Despite atrocities such as the brutal suppression of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in the 1950s, Kwarteng believes the old links forged in Empire days will aid new trade deals.
There's a vast world out there, nearly 80% of global GDP, which is outside the EU. And a lot of that GDP is taken up by Commonwealth countries.
Critics say almost half of British exports go to the European Union, $288 billion worth every year, but exports to Africa total just $21.3 billion. To boost that trade, Britain wants quick deals with emerging economies, but African nations should be cautious, says Matt Grady of Tradecraft, which advocates fair trade and global justice.
African countries have indicated that their priorities are regional integration and cooperation. So now is not really the time for the UK to be trying to negotiate deals with African countries that will undermine those priorities. It will undermine their ability to develop their manufacturing and their processing sectors.
Brexit poses other risks. Britain imports $9.7 billion worth of goods from Africa, including produce like coffee from Kenya or wine from South Africa.
Producers in developing countries, they don't know what tariffs they're going to face to sell into Britain. They face uncertainty around that. That means that supply chains, decisions are being made now for 2 years down the line in uncertain conditions.
Citing that uncertainty, the head of the African, Caribbean and Pacific group of nations said this week a free trade deal with Britain should be delayed until at least 6 years after Brexit.
Also, the UK government has launched a new campaign against domestic slavery, also known as illegal house help. A new pilot campaign focuses on helping those trapped in domestic slavery, mistreated and forced to work long hours with no pay.
My name is Teresa. I'm from Nigeria. My family is very poor. One day, a family friend said they would train one of us in the UK, and they chose me. But we did not know they were deceiving us. When I arrived, they took my passport. I would work early morning till midnight every day. No school, no friends. I was very lonely and I was very afraid. Brother James from church saw them abuse me a few times, so he decided to talk to them. But they didn't listen to him. Brother James was very worried, so he called the Modern Slavery Helpline. That was how Mrs. Annabelle, the support worker, and the police got involved. I was so afraid. I didn't know how I would survive in the UK without my madam and her husband. But Mrs. Annabelle said her people will help me, and I believed her. I'm happy I did.
An organization, Sport the Signs, is encouraging members of the community to call the Modern Slavery Helpline to report concerns, seek advice, and get help. Theresa May and the Conservative Party have promised strong leadership and stable government that deliver best Brexit deals ahead of the June 8th elections. While addressing supporters at a rally, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said that a vote for him and Labour is a vote for a government that provides for all and not just a few people.
And that is very clear. That let's look, the other parties are lining up to prop up Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen it with the Liberal Democrats, and we see it with Nicola Sturgeon's Scottish nationalists. They're very clear that they want to do everything they can to frustrate our Brexit negotiations, to undermine the job that we have to do, the task that lies ahead, do everything to stop us from being able to take Britain forward. And it's their tunnel vision, focus on independence, that actually provides uncertainty. They want to pull the strings, try to pull the strings of this election, prop up Jeremy Corbyn, and provide more risk and uncertainty for the British people, and that's not in Britain's interests. So it's only a vote for the Conservatives that can deliver, and every vote for the Conservatives, every vote is a vote for me and local Conservative candidates, and it's a vote to ensure that we have that strong and stable leadership that we need to take us through Brexit and beyond. Every vote for me and the local Conservative candidates here and across Britain is a vote to deliver on that plan for a stronger Britain and a more secure future for us all.
A Labour Party that's standing up for working people to improve the lives of all. It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail. And as Ian explained, a duty for all of us here today, the duty of every Labour MP, a duty of our 500,000 members, including, and I welcome them, the 2,500 who've joined in the last 24 hours. Much of the media and the establishment are saying this election is a foregone conclusion. They think there are rules in politics which, if you don't follow by doffing your cap to the powerful people, accepting that things can't really change, then you can't win. But of course, they do not want us to win, because when we win, it is the people, not the powerful, who win. the nurse, the teacher, the small trader, the carer, the builder, the office worker, the student, the carer win. We all win. It's the establishment that complains, I don't play by the rules, by which they mean their rules. We can't win, they say, when we don't play their game. We don't fit in their cosy club. We're not obsessed with the tittle-tattle of Westminster or Brussels. We don't accept that it is natural for Britain to be governed by a ruling elite, the city and the tax dodgers. We don't accept that the British people just have to take what they're given. At that, they don't deserve better. And in a sense, the establishment and their camp followers in the media are quite right. I don't play by their rules. And if a Labour government is elected on the 8th of June, we won't play by their rules either.
Media outlets say journalism now faces more challenges, including battling fake news. This was made known at the World Press Freedom Day Forum at the George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. Public and private media outlets stated that defending press freedom and safety of journalists should be made a priority.
Panelists discussed the public's growing hunger for accurate information and the efforts of some governments to limit access to it.
They run the gamut from truly despotic places to places we might even have looked at as democracies, where controlling the flow of information has become a principal tool of their government. And it's made it extremely difficult, and in some cases extremely dangerous, to gather news.
Increasingly, there is what the head of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, John Lansing, referred to as a weaponization of information.
You look at what's happening coming out of the Kremlin, and it's really almost beyond a false narrative. It's more of a strategy to establish that there's really no such thing as an empirical fact. Facts are really what are being challenged around the world by these regimes, and you see that now happening in Turkey as well.
Last week, Reporters Without Borders released its 2017 World Press Freedom Index. Russia came in at 148 out of the 180 countries. The group says since 2012, leading independent news outlets have either been brought under government control or throttled out of existence. Turkey fell 4 places to 155 in the same index. According to Freedom House, a pro-democracy advocacy group, press freedom globally declined to its lowest levels in 13 years. One reason, new threats to journalists and media outlets in major democracies.
Not only is it more difficult for us to bring, the world to America, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to bring America to the world because of the climate that we have here. It's not just about law and danger, it's about respect for the press.
I happen to know how dishonest the media is.
President Donald Trump has called the media an enemy of the American people and accused some U.S. media outlets of spreading fake news. Reporters Without Borders has said Trump's media bashing is emboldening other world leaders to mistreat their own media. In response to questions about whether the Voice of America can remain neutral, not become a voice of the Trump administration, Lansing said people need to understand the VOA charter makes it illegal for that to happen.
That report, we conclude the news roundup for this week. Thank you for being part of the program. Tunde Alabi. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. As part of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create a platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely green community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevision uk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on RTV.